This is an AMI podcast.
Summer romances end for all kinds of reasons, but when all is said and done, they have one thing in common. They are shooting stars, a spectacular moment of light in the heavens. This is AMI Audiobook Review, the weekly podcast where we chat all things audiobooks, and I'm your host, Ramya Amuddin. Joining me is Nasreen Abdelmajid, and we have started off for the final weekend of July with a quote from Nicholas Sparks, because why not end July with a little bit of romance? I mean, we've already kind of determined that summer is very, very romantic for some of us. So at least there's the potential for romance.
For
So
these
Nicholas
lucky
Sparks
ones.
brings it. Yeah. For the lucky ones with the summer love and the youth and all of that. But it is kind of, I feel like a kid at school again. We've been reading a lot of books to do with school. Son of a Critch by Mark Critch, and his childhood memoir was just hysterical. And it was all about school, right? So it feels like I'm a little bit on summer break, Nasreen. So end of July feels like halfway through summer. Oh no, got to be back in school in a month, which nobody's going back to school. We're all working, but still it has that vibe. Are you in this headspace at all, or is it just me?
I think it's just you, but I'm
Okay,
wondering.
thanks.
I think it is just you, but I'm wondering, reading these books that we read in high school, reading it as an adult, are you getting it from a different perspective? Do you feel like you're more mature reading it? You're thinking more logically about it? Or
I
is it just another book?
No, it totally makes a difference reading it as an adult, or even reading things about kids as an adult. It is another example by Stephen King, the title It, reading about these kids in school and the things that they get to. And it's not written as a kid, right? It's written from an adult perspective. And some of these kids are just, whoa, like they're way mature for their age, or at least when I was their age, it was very different. But it is so interesting. It's almost nostalgic reading it as an adult, even though you haven't gone through what they've gone through, but it makes you feel like you're a kid again. So it's kind of cool, actually. Let's get to the CELA homepage, because we like to check out their featured titles. Right at the very top, CELAlibrary.ca for the Center for Equitable Library Access. And the titles up there are You Made a Fool Out of Death with Your Beauty by Akiki Emezi. We talked about this last week, and it's a contemporary romance. River of the Gods by Candice Millard. Adventurers and Explorers. Check this one out. We're going to talk about it a little later on. All the Things We Don't Talk About by Amy Feltman is a family stories category, and that's the last featured title on the CELA homepage. Nasreen, you got something for us that will spike some discussion.
Yeah, so the Good e-reader released an article that talks about the top benefits of listening to audiobooks. So let's break it down. Starts with it's hands and eyes free. I mean, multitasking is a big thing in our day and age. And then next, it improves pronunciation.
Oh,
I
good
think
one.
this is really good for me because I'm like, oh, that's how you pronounce it. I've been pronouncing things very wrong. And next, it improves critical thinking skills. And the last one is it's a mental health boost. So can you relate to this? Do you feel like it does all these things, improves pronunciation for you, critical thinking skills, and your mental health boost? Does it do that for you?
Dude, okay, first of all, pronunciation. That's the top one, bang
Right?
on. Because, okay, how many times have you read books, or like in print when you could, right? If you could, when you could. And then later on, you move to the audiobook version, or just, when you're rereading something, but in audio, you realize you've been pronouncing all the names wrong,
So many
even
times.
the dialects and the accents, like so many things that you just put your own sounds to in your head because you're like,
Yeah.
right? Not all of us go pause our books and then go into whatever search engine and figure out if we're saying the names and the words and even the dialects correctly in our head.
Yeah.
So audiobooks completely make a difference that way for me. There's books that I've read where I like, even from the title, if there's names in the title or synopsis, I have no idea how to say it. Screen reader butchers it, so that's, two bad probabilities. And then you listen to it in audiobook and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, that's way better. Thank you.
Yeah, I actually have a question, a follow-up question, because it just made me think of it does improve pronunciation, but I feel like a lot of the time when I hear the word out loud, I'm like, okay, wait, I want to know what this means. So
Yep,
I pause it and I go research it.
you actually
Or
do
are
that.
you the type of person that, okay, you listen to the word and you're like, I don't know what that is, but I'm gonna guess this is what it means,
Yeah.
and we move on.
That's literally me. And
Really?
I'm honestly ashamed. I'm ashamed to say it, but that's me because it kills my momentum, especially if I'm really into a book. It kills my momentum to make it a school situation and go check out the vocabulary. What I do is just read around it and I'm like, I think I
Mm,
understood the
I think,
context.
yeah.
Yeah.
Like, the sentence makes sense a little bit.
Yeah. But your approach is obviously way better because then you start recognizing the word more, you can utilize it more, and it actually does improve your vocabulary. But for me, that's more likely to happen in an audiobook because I hear the word and I like it. So I'll
Y
go check it out versus print books, or,
I think
reading with a screen reader.
also listening to it, it does make more sense than reading it.
Of
Like, while
course.
when it improves your vocabulary, I know sometimes I do research the word, but at the same time, hearing it out loud, I'm like, okay, this kind of makes sense, but just in case, I'll research it. However, when I read a sentence and I don't understand one of the words, I'm like, wait, it's. I feel like I feel like the words are jumbled at this point. It just doesn't
Yeah.
make sense, and I end up reading the sentence 3 times to get it.
E exactly. And how about the mental health aspect? Any, you know, guesses or personal insights on what it means when, audiobooks help with your mental health? For me, when I listen to audiobooks, it puts me in such a clean, unless it's a terrifying book or something really sorrowful. But for the most part, it puts me in such a clean, relaxed, mental state. It reminds me of when I really think about it, it reminds me of being a kid, listening to my parents tell stories, listening to
Mm.
teachers read out loud, like those things. And those things I loved so much growing up, right? I loved chilling and just listening to other people tell stories or actually read aloud to
Oh,
me.
yes.
So when I finally discovered audiobooks, because it feels like, I could have started with audiobooks years ago, um, that somehow my headspace would always end up in these really beautiful, okay, I'm ready to listen,
Mhm.
relaxed atmospheres. And I love that. And I think that you're right, that these things definitely help with mental health. And it's a bit on us, right, to kind of reflect and understand that. But even if you aren't recognizing it or aren't conscious of it, it's still helping. This is AMI Audiobook Review on AMI Audio, and we are always looking for your recommendations. So if you want to give us one, 1-866-509-4545. You can leave us a message for the show and give us your commentary, plus feedback at ami.ca. If you'd rather give us a quick email, shout out, or recommendation, we take it. I'm your host, Ramya Amudan, and it's time for us to do Pause or Play. So we checked out some titles in the featured titles category on the CELA homepage. That's the Center for Equitable Library Access. Let's take a closer look at the second title, River of the Gods: Genius, Courage, and Betrayal in the Search for the Source of the Nile by Candice Millard. This is categorized as adventurers and explorers. So here we go, and then you tell me, would you pause or play this audiobook? The harrowing story of one of the great feats of exploration of all time and its complicated legacy. In the 19th century, there was a frenzy of interest in ancient Egypt. At the same time, European powers sent off waves of explorations intended to map the unknown corners of the globe and extend their colonial empires. Richard Burton and John Hennon Speke were sent by the Royal Geographical Society to claim the prize for England. Burton spoke 29 languages and was a decorated soldier. Speck was a young aristocrat an army officer, determined to make his mark, passionate about hunting, Burden's opposite in temperament and beliefs. From the start, the two men clashed. They would endure tremendous hardships, illness, and constant setbacks. 2 years in, deep in the African interior, Burden became too sick to press on, but spected and claimed that he found the source in a great lake that he christened Lake Victoria. When they returned to England, Speaky rushed to take credit, disparaging Burden. But there was a third man present in both expeditions without whom neither Englishman would have made any progress. In River of the Gods, Candice Millard has written a peerless story of courage and adventure set against the backdrop of the race to explore Africa by the colonial powers. Here we go around the table, starting with you, Nisreen. Pause or play on this title.
Okay, first of all, the description was just way too long. Second of all, there was too many big words. Third of all, I'm just gonna click pause on that.
Okay. No second
Making-
thought necessary.
Yeah, exactly.
Just an FYI that I did cut down the synopsis by probably
You
half.
did,
Oh,
and that's
man.
the thing.
Brutal.
It's just way too long.
You know, these pause or plays have been excellent to get to know exactly how quickly you would respond to these books. I love it. Okay. So a hard pause for Nisreen. Karen, pause or play?
I would totally play this thanks to my ancient history teacher in high school. 100% had me at the title.
Okay. Now, particularly the Nile, like this specific history and geographical exploration, make a difference for you, or just regardless?
Anything to do when you get into archaeological research, I think that would have been my other career. I love it. I am all in. Like, find me treasures, find me anything you can find me about how people lived before, about hidden worlds. I'm still convinced we're going to find hidden world stuff. Not conspiracy theory type stuff, but just there's so many parts of the world we still don't know yet. And I love that idea.
Okay, quick follow-up question. If it wasn't written the way it is in this book, right, with the story aspect of it, the drama, would you read it as an article versus a book?
I would read it as an article as well.
Okay.
I love anything ancient history, or like anything like archaeological, like looking for things, in like Indiana Jones type stuff.
Okay. So for me, I'm kind of middle of the ground in comparison to both of your responses, because I would press play on this for sure, but it's not like a super excited play. It's more like I am very curious about this particular find. I love reading about anything to do with, nature, but it's not the exploration part that grabs me. It's specifically the Nile, specifically this location and this part of exploration. But I'm not gonna lie, like if this information was handed to me in a peer-reviewed article form, I'd probably go for that over the book version. But good to know that we have a hard play in this in the three of us. So the title here is River of the Gods: Genius, Courage, and Betrayal. That's the full title. In the Search for the Source of the Nile by Candice Millard. You can find it as one of the featured titles this month on the CELA Library homepage, celalibrary.ca. And we check in with an avid reader. We're opening up the space right now to review, discuss, recommend, browse, conceptualize, and reminisce on audiobooks. And the voice you heard was that of Karen Magee, who we welcome to the space. She's one of our content development specialists here at AMI, joining us from Morrisburg, Ontario. Karen, it's so nice to finally have you on the show.
Okay, you've been hanging out with Kelly too much, calling me Magoo, because that's what he always calls me. That's really funny.
Right? No, this is an actual, it's not even a Freudian slip. It's a Kelly slip. Like, what? I've never done that before.
Cracks me up. And I will respond to anything. So my first name is Karen. It's really hard to offend me at
Right.
this point.
Oh my God. The trends are against you. So, Karen, starting right off the top, so we know exactly what your listening is like. How much actual audiobook listening, because we know you're an avid book reader. You can talk about books for hours and hours and hours, but audiobook listening specifically, how much have you explored in that territory?
I do probably more than you would think. I do a lot while I'm driving. actually the most recent book I just finished today, I did both. I read some of it, and then when I was in the car, I was enjoying the story so much, so I downloaded the audiobook to listen to while I was driving places.
Oh,
I
nice.
didn't want to put the book down. So I did a little half and half. When I'm walking, I like to have an audiobook if I'm going for a walk as opposed to a run. And I've done several books that way. And I get them from my local little small library.
So hold up, do you not listen to
I just
audiobooks while you're running?
I need music or something a little more
Okay, got
bouncy.
you.
No, otherwise my time gets really bad.
Makes sense. And speaking of activities you love doing, this is with reading. You love reading on the river. If anyone has heard you talk on other shows, you explain this whole scenario of taking your books out to the water. Can you explain it on this show?
So what I used to do when I was much younger, and I will still do it once in a while if I get the opportunity, but I would take a book and take a boat up the river, or if I was at somebody's cottage, take the boat a little bit up the lake and then turn off the engine and get my book out and just drift back to where I was going. So you have to go like against you have to go up current and then drift back to where you're going. And before it was illegal, there may or may not have been a pitcher of sangria involved, but I don't do that anymore because
Before it was illegal.
before it was illegal, I will fully admit I used to have like sangria in the boat with me while I read. And you know what? It was a great way to get away because if I was at somebody's cottage, I was usually the person tasked with doing all the cooking.
Right.
And it was just a nice way. Like in the middle of the afternoon, I would I say, I need an hour by myself, guys.
This honestly sounds like the
And out in
best
the
way to
boat,
do it.
awesome.
With or without the
Best thing. I had a
sangria.
hammock. I had a hammock in the last few years in my backyard, but they cut down my hammock trees this spring. They were dying,
Oh
and they cut down my. I miss my hammock for
my
reading.
gosh.
They were perfect trees. There's not very often you get perfect hammock trees where they're the perfect width apart, and my hammock fit beautifully, and I could just crawl up in there and
Wow.
hide for an afternoon and read. I miss my
I
trees.
love you paint such a picture, like I have such basic, like, yeah, cleaning and walking around, whatever, but these sound like ideal book reading, book listening scenarios. I love it so much. Nice.
I mean, when I was a kid, I used to do it in front of my nightlight with the Nancy Drew books, thinking my mother didn't know, but she knew. Um, I will read. I will read anywhere. I will read anything. I will read anywhere. It's my safe place.
Okay, see, and now this leads perfectly into my next question. Now we know how hard it is to pick a favorite book, not telling you, not putting a gun to your head, Karen. But if you had to try, could you pick a favorite? An all-time absolute?
Oh, okay. So I'm really torn on this one, and I thought of some more after we were emailing back and forth last night.
Mm-hmm.
So no, it depends on my mood. So I woke up this morning going, "Oh no, The Stand by Stephen King is my favorite book," which is something we didn't even like talk about. And I'm going to start off by saying the book sometimes I answer the most with, and it really bothers me that it's still one of my favorite books because it is very problematic. I don't want to use the excuse that it was written in 1936 and that was the time, but it's Gone with the Wind. And the reason I like it is because it was starred a stubborn female.
Yep.
Shocker. I may or may not have some stubborn female traits in me. I know.
Shocking.
But it was a woman who who in a time where it wasn't appropriate basically said, I don't care what people say. I don't care about being a lady. I need to do what's best for me and my family, and I'm going to figure out a way to do that. And I responded to that. And again, I know it's problematic, and I haven't picked it up for a while. I used to read it at least once a year. For about 30 years, I read it at least once a year. And I haven't picked it up for a while because there's that dichotomy about it being art that is problematic.
Mm.
That when it was written wasn't problematic, but now is problematic. Can you still like it? And
Yep.
I struggle with that. I struggle with that whether it's actors or authors. There's a couple of my favorite authors that's happened to in the last couple of years. Where is there a balance? Do you cut something off entirely? So I struggle with that one a lot.
And to be fair,
and my other favorite,
like there are lots of books like that now, right? Now, especially because of cancel culture, there's so many. We don't even have to say books. There's so many art forms and projects and things from the past, products from the past that are just not good. They don't stand up very well to today's atmosphere. But Gone with the Wind is a really good example because it is quite problematic, but I felt the same way, and I've reread it a couple of times also, where the character Scarlett, like, she really draws you in because of what she was fighting for herself at the time. Now she is problematic herself too. Just putting that out there.
She's not perfect.
Yeah,
I mean, she was running a business. Women didn't
exactly,
run businesses. Like, she ran a store.
exactly.
And did she always make the right choices? No, but nobody always makes the right choices. And she had consequences to her actions. Like, it wasn't one of these heroines who could be like, was everything always went her way. Like, her life was not
Mm-hmm.
easy. Um, I mean, her daughter died, her father died in a horrible accident. She lived through the Civil War. She had to fight to save her family land. But boy, the way that some of the characters were portrayed in that book
Oh,
is
it's so
just not
absolutely good.
good.
Yeah.
And the more we learn about that era of history, I mean, you think about it, the Confederacy was only around for what, 3 years, 3 or 4, like, it wasn't around that long, but there's so much culture around it.
There is. And you talk about the historical, I broke down a lot of the psychological, right? Like, to be a woman like Scarlett living in that time, and also being like thinking of it kind of from my contemporary perspectives, right? Like, and then she's also always comparing herself to the norm of ladies, right? At that time, and what it means to be a lady and why she's not like that. But going through the headspace of all that was so fascinating to me too. And because the book is so long, just putting it out there, because the book is so long, it really does get you in the headspace of, who she is.
It's so much better than the movie. I will always, if you give me a choice of book over movie, I will always choose book, because you
Yep,
learn so much more about the characters. And she was bullied. Like, you look at it now, like, the women of society
she
bullied
was.
her and shunned her
Yeah.
because she had opinions that didn't fall in line with everybody else. And being a woman back then, let's face it, was not pleasant. Like,
Mm-mm.
it was not pleasant being a woman, and she wanted to enjoy life. And what's wrong with that?
And she had kids and she was a divorcee. Like, there's so many things that even if you look at it now, in like different cultures or around the world, women are still facing. And I kept doing that comparison, right? Like, parts of this still happens today, but especially at that time.
Yeah, it's wild. And did you ever read the follow-up books that were written sort of in art, like, more recently? And I
I
must
did. I read Scarlet,
read Scarlet and
the
read
second
Butler's
one.
People. I read Butler's People too. I really liked Scarlet.
Oh,
I like Scarlet sometimes, I think,
yep,
better than Gone with the Wind, because it felt a little, I hate to use I don't want to use the word woke, but it felt a little more realistic to the times, if that makes
sure.
sense. Like,
Yep, progressing.
yeah, like the people who were slaves weren't necessarily caricatures of slaves. Like, you got a little bit more of what they heard. And then she ended up in
Mm.
Ireland, which I just love that. I love that storyline.
Karen, I just got to say, we're completely out of time.
That is not
But
being,
before we go,
I'm not done yet.
be- I know, exactly. She's not done yet. She's going to hold on to the mic. But before we go, tell us in a couple seconds what you're reading right now, if you recommend it to people.
So I just finished a book called The Couple Next Door. It came out in 2016 by a Canadian author. It was wonderful. It was twists and turns. It's by Sherry Lapina. I would recommend it if you like books like Gone Girl.
Oh, that's a good book. Awesome, Karen. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. And honestly, you will be back on. I'm not just saying that. I say that to everybody. I really mean it for you.
I'm always available. I'm always happy to anytime you call, I'm there.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And we will be back next week for the next episode of AMI Audiobook Review, checking in with our friends from the Selah Library. Until then, have a good weekend. Happy audiobook listening.
This was an AMI podcast. For more accessible media, visit ami.ca.